I'm Sarah Bivens.
And I'm Matthew Bivens.
We had a home birth back in 2016.
So we started a podcast about it.
And then grew it into a birth brand to help future and current parents believe in their success with home birth.
This is the place to hear home birth stories, along with helpful resources and tips to feel empowered and supported in your birth journey.
This is Doing It at Home. Hello and welcome back to Doing It at Home. I'm Sarah. Today's episode is the 40-hour home birth that almost wasn't with Josephine Breen. Before we get into today's episode, just want to thank you for being here. Thank you so much for listening. And however you found us or whenever you found us, the fact that you are here right now in this moment listening, just want to extend some heartfelt gratitude and appreciation for you. And if you would like to support the show, keep Doing It at Home rolling, if you would like us to be around for a few more years to come and listen to awesome birth stories and find other amazing home birth content, you can support us in a number of different ways and with different levels of resources. So you can hit that subscribe button on whatever device you're listening to right now. Greatly appreciated. You can give us a review on iTunes. You can follow us on our social media. Our Instagram is at Doing It at Home. You can join our private Facebook group. You can subscribe to our new YouTube channel and turn on the notifications. And you can also purchase any of the products that we have out there, like our book, Doing It at Home, available on Amazon. We have a shop full of some really cool merch, including one of our newest additions, a graphic that says, "Home birth, established 300,000 years ago." And it's kind of becoming a fan favorite, and I get it because it's pretty awesome, and I love it because home birth has been around since we've been around, y'all. So if you are interested in getting your mug or your tea or your tank that says home birth, established 300,000 years ago, go check out the shop. Links to that are in the show notes, along with everything else I just listed, all of those ways that you can support and lean in to the Doing It at Home community further. Those links are in the show notes, so go check that out. Today's episode, some of the things that we talk about, these are a lot of keywords here. These are a lot of big hot topics. So I have a feeling that any one of these things are going to resonate with a lot of people. So for one thing, we talk about military family and choosing home birth as a military family. We talk about being born at home yourself and then choosing home birth to have your own children. We talk about education for your birth partner. We talk about preeclampsia. We talk about membrane sweeps, the power of prayer, long labor without a lot of sleep, cervical lip, fetal ejection reflex, having community to support you, and letting go when labor gets hard. This is chock full of some really great topics, so I'm really excited for you to listen to it. Quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll dive right in with Josephine. Doing It at Home is sponsored by KiwiCo, a subscription box filled with playful activities designed especially for curious and creative babies and toddlers. It feels great when you're getting a gift for a friend, family member, or your own little one that's not only age-appropriate and fun, but it's dedicated to developing their skills and their growing brains. Like the Panda Crate we got for our 10-month-old niece and the Kiwi Crate we got for our 5-year-old daughter. When you sign up, a new crate is sent to you every other month and you can cancel or pause at any time. There's no commitment. Build a foundation for early learning with the Panda Crate from KiwiCo. Get 50% off your first month plus free shipping at kiwico.com/DIAH. That's half off your first month at KiwiCo, KIWICO.com/DIAH. Hi, Josephine. Welcome. How are you?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm great. How are you?
Very well. And I'm excited to be talking with you. We had some back and forth and connection before the interview. And I love that I get to say Josephine and call you Josephine because that's Maya's middle name. And so that's just a little connection that we had before getting on the interview. It's such a great name.
And I know I'm biased, but I fully agree. It is a good name.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about you and your family?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I am, as you said, Josephine. I'm married to my husband, Lucas. We've been married for almost 4 years now, which is crazy. Our daughter, Myriam, is 10 months old. And and I can't forget the 2-year-old Weimaraner, the dog, Francie. So she'd be a little upset if I left her out.
Sure.
But we live in the Pacific Northwest. Our living situation is a little interesting right now. We've been up north of Seattle for the past couple years, but right now Lucas is in the Coast Guard and he's deployed right now. So while he's gone, Myriam and I and the dog have all moved back down to Salem, Oregon, where our families live. So we were able to move back in next door to my in-laws. My parents are 15 minutes away. It just makes a lot of sense. And then, as I mentioned, Lucas is in the Coast Guard, and I just started I've been doing contract sewing for a long time, but I just launched my own small business sewing heirloom baptismal gowns, which is pretty exciting.
Wow.
And yeah, that's us.
That's you
We're
all.
just having fun.
Yeah. Well, congrats to you on doing what you're passionate about and
Thank you.
launching that. We can very much relate there as far as entrepreneurial spirit is concerned.
Yeah.
So, and it's no joke. It is not for the faint of heart. So I acknowledge you in that.
Thanks.
And doing the whole mom thing, all of that.
Yeah, that's the best part.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about home birth, why for you and how, because you kind of have a history with it.
I do. So my mom is a home birther. Shout out to my mom. She's awesome. And so I was born at home. And then when I was almost 12, I got to be there for the home birth of my baby sister. And that was what really just sealed the deal for me. I have known it was amazing.
Tell us a little bit more about that. I want to hear more about that because 12, you probably have full memory of that. I mean, 12, you're coming into, your pubescent years. And so you have an idea of things and you might even be thinking about having babies someday in a different way than when you're just like young playing with dolls. So
exactly.
How did that land for you? How did that experience impact you?
And it was hugely impactful. I was, first of all, just so excited to be getting a baby sister. My third sister is 2 years younger than me. So there's a bit of a gap between her and Georgia, the youngest. And I was just so excited that my mom was having a baby. We're going to have a baby in the house. And my mom I'm really lucky. My mom has always been super positive and open about birth. She's told us our birth stories from the time we were super little. And I have never heard my mom describe birth as painful. She describes it as intense, very intense, but I don't actually think my mom experiences painful birth, which is super cool. So that was never even a paradigm for me. I didn't even realize people were scared of birth until probably high school. So going into Georgia's birth, like I was just super excited to see it. And it was amazing. It was fast labor. How long was it all together? I think it was like 3 or 4 hours all together. And I just remember we were getting all set up downstairs with my dad and grandma getting Monopoly set up because we were like settling in. All right, mom's in labor. This is going to be a while. And then one of the midwives comes down and is like, you guys might want to come up like now if you don't want to miss it. So that all went super fast. And then sort of one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. My mom's she was hoping for a water birth and her water broke in the tub and there was meconium staining. So the midwives were like, okay, we're scrapping the water birth. Sorry, not happening. She's pushing at this point. My mom experiences fetal ejection reflex. And so they haul her out of the tub, get her up on the bed, and they go, okay, we need you to have this baby in 2 pushes. And she did. And it was that was the coolest thing to see.
Gosh.
So.
And it's just what you knew. It's just what you understood to be. Like you said, you didn't know anything different or that there were other contexts around birth until later on.
Yeah. No, it was normal. And that was actually, so I always known that I wanted a home birth. And that was actually, I know if Matthew were here, he would probably be asking about
He
now
sure
how Lucas
would.
felt about this.
He sure would.
So wanted to address that.
Yes.
Because that's kind of a funny story as well. That was actually the day we got engaged. I told Lucas, just so you know, this is pretty much a deal breaker for me. I will be having home births. So if you have a problem with that, we might want to rethink this whole ring thing. And luckily he was totally on board. But
that's awesome. So were there other conversations to help, him feel comfortable? Because it's one thing to, yes, I support you, and I still might be a little bit scared. Was there anything like that, or was it just he was along for the ride?
There were a few. I think in general, I don't know, our relationship is one where we recognize and appreciate that we have different strengths in different areas, and we are generally pretty cool with trusting each other to do the research in the areas in which we have interests. So for sure, I shared some research with him along the way and some stats and, safety stuff and all that. But he was in general just really, really trusting that I knew what I was talking about and I knew what I was doing, and he was just along for the ride.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. And what were your plans, intentions, visions? People will use different terminology for that, but did you have ideas about what you wanted out of your birth experience?
I'll say I don't know. I don't think I did quite as much thinking about that aspect as I probably would like to for future births.
Okay.
Which is funny because I was doing all the research, and I feel like knowledge-wise I was super prepared, but in terms of what I wanted out of the experience, I didn't give it quite as much thought. I think I did try to be pretty intentional about letting the birth be what it was going to be. I didn't want to set myself up for feeling like I had failed by creating this perfect, birth vision. And that's something that I know I'm prone to do. And it'll hang me up in other areas. So I didn't want to get hung up on that with birth. But I do think there was probably a little more work I could have done in terms of just, I don't know, preparing emotionally, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I think you make a great point. I think something that others can learn from and potentially mitigate any sort of stuff later on is there is a difference between the mental educational preparation part, like to know the physiological aspects of birth and to know what's going to happen. That's one thing, but it's another to think about what you want out of the birth experience. There's what you can potentially expect, and then there's what would you like to create. And I absolutely think there's a different component of the emotional preparation and just work, so to speak, that can be done to it's more than prepare yourself. It's just you're setting a scene, you're setting an intention for an experience, because you're going to have an experience. So just like anything else, a wedding day, a birthday party or something, we visualize, we think about what do we want out of that day or that experience. And that is a different mode, and it's a different part of our brain and a part of our spirit, I think, than what are the logistics.
For sure. No, I 100% agree with you on that.
Gotcha. So how were you feeling in your pregnancy? Were there any things that helped you, or were there any of those, great tools or tips?
Yeah, I had a pretty smooth pregnancy. I was reasonably sick at the beginning. I felt at the time like I wasn't very sick, which is cool. And looking back, I'm like, well, I was throwing up every morning. So maybe that was a little bit more than I thought it was. But yeah, I was, gosh, all of the things. I was just, like I said before, doing all the research. I was listening to podcasts. Yours was definitely my favorite. And just hearing all those fabulous home birth stories. What else? Let's see. I was reading anime, and a really great resource was Dr. Aviva Ram. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Yeah. And I'll put a link
Yeah.
to that and everything else that you shared.
Awesome.
And you also sent me a
Thank
great
you.
list. So I'll put that in the show notes. But yeah, she's real deal. I'm a huge fan.
She is. Oh, she's fabulous. And I got pregnant in January of 2020. And so just a couple months after I got pregnant, she started doing this Facebook like outreach program. Essentially, it was basically free birth classes that she was doing in a Facebook group. And a friend of mine who's actually a student midwife, shout out to Lisa Marie, she's super cool.
Nice.
But she sent me the link to that when I don't even know, not very pregnant. She was like, you should check this out. And I clicked the link. I'm like, yes, I should. And that was, that ended up being super helpful. So
That's great.
yeah.
Well, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we will talk about the birth experience.
Perfect.
Okay. So tell us how you knew labor was starting.
So let's see. This is where things get a little bit interesting and not a little off the beaten track.
Okay.
So I went in for my 37-week appointment with my midwives. And I was on a Monday, September 14th. I go in, and that I had been having some slightly elevated blood pressure. It wasn't technically high yet, but it was high for me. So they were keeping an eye on that. And they'd started having me come in every week, and they were checking my for protein in my urine every time. So, and I go in at 37 weeks, and this time there was protein in my urine, and my blood pressure when I was sitting up was in the officially high range. If I laid down on my side, my midwife Charlotte was able to get a still, borderline okay reading, but if I sat or stood up, it was not great. So we all thought at this point, okay, I have developed preeclampsia. And, they were really kind and compassionate about that, but they were just talking me through, okay, we're going to, we'd like to draw blood to send over to the hospital to get labs run, because that'll confirm the diagnosis. But in the meantime, we're going to send you home to rest, and you are most likely going to need to go in to the hospital for an induction on magnesium, whole 9 yards. And my midwife Charlotte, she warned me she's a just wonderful person, and she warned me just straight up. She's like, this is going to be very difficult. She goes, I have seen women do this and still without pain relief, and still have as natural a birth as possible, as intervention free as possible, but it's very difficult. And so that was what we were gearing up for. And so we decided, Charlotte and I decided that it would be a good idea for her to do a membrane sweep, since that might sort of, if I was going to have to go in for an induction, that would probably sort of help things along.
Okay.
That was the hope. So she did that. And then we went home, and I was instructed to rest, and we were going to pack a hospital bag.
How are you doing? How are you doing emotionally, and how were you processing
not
that?
Great.
Yeah.
Not great. I remember, going home and calling my mom and just like breaking down on the phone to my mom. And my mom shared some wisdom that was really, I don't know that I fully appreciated it in the moment, but I think it's just so wonderful. But my mom said that, we're Christians, and my mom said, God is going to send you the birth that you need. He knows what you need. He knows better than you do, and he's going to send you the birth you need. And that ended up being so true. Looking back, I can totally see that. But yeah, so I wasn't doing great. I called my mom. I we were, texting friends and family. And this is where things start to get just really, I don't know, start to get a little emotional, because we were texting and emailing and calling friends and family, and everybody was starting to pray for us. And we had so many people praying for us. And it's still just, yeah, it gets me to think about, because I think that was, I think that was instrumental in how the birth ended up going.
Mm-hmm.
Our priest and his wife ended up, we have married clergy, we're Orthodox Christians, and they came by to say prayers for us. And then they actually brought, so like I said, we're Orthodox Christians, and in our tradition, we remember and venerate people who have been close to God, call them saints.
Mm-hmm.
And we ask them for their prayers to God, because we believe they are still alive in Him. And there's a really beloved modern day Russian American saint, Saint John Maximovich. He actually died in Seattle in the 60s, so quite recent. And he's known for working miracles. And it's so they brought some oil from the vigil lamp at his grave, and Lucas ended up anointing me with that a couple different times throughout my labor. And we really believe that he was working overtime for us. So that was really amazing. And then I started contracting that night at, I think, 8 or 9. And it was just, kind of started as mild cramps. I think about halfway through dinner, I was like, wait a second, these cramps are rhythmic. Like, I've been having some sort of intermittent cramping from the membrane sweep, but they are rhythmic now. So we went to bed, and I kept contracting. And they were fairly intense fairly quickly. I hit 411 at 4 a.m. And then we called my midwife, Charlotte, and we called my mom. And my midwives, they have, 3 midwives and several student midwives in the practice. But they'd had another mom go into labor that night. So Charlotte was at that birth, and she said, she'd be there when she could. My mom got on the road, left Salem, Oregon, and drove 80 miles per hour all the way up to Everett, Washington, which is particularly impressive because my mom has driving anxiety.
Oh, man.
But she was not missing this for anything.
Well, yeah. And what you've said about her already, I'm sure something kicked in, and she was a woman on a mission. So there was no stopping that.
For sure. She was there in like a little over 4.5 hours. It was pretty great. So yeah, Charlotte came by at about 6 a.m. I was only 1.5 centimeters, which was, a little bit disappointing after not a ton of sleep. But my blood pressure, if I was laying down, was low enough that they could let me stay home.
Wow.
And she said after the birth, she said, I thought I was showing up to send you to the hospital.
Right.
I really did. So that was pretty amazing.
And just for clarity's sake, for, those listening, had she gotten there and the blood pressure was still high, you would have gone to the hospital? Is that kind of what the agreement was? Okay. But as long as it stayed within
because I was in early labor. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And so at any point, did you communicate with any of the doctors that you had seen when you had gone there, and they, earlier that day? Or was there any sort of communication?
I'd actually not gone into the hospital. They had drawn blood at the midwife practice and sent it into the hospital to have the labs done. So I didn't have to deal with any doctors or fear mongering, which was really, really nice not to have to deal with that.
Okay.
And because I know that there can be some concern about planned home birth, especially when things look like they're going sideways.
Right.
So yeah, my mom showed up fairly early that morning. My sister showed up a little later. My middle sister, Nora, who lives in the Seattle area. And we had totally forgotten to tell her that I was in labor. So she thought she was just showing up to give me flowers and send me on my way to the hospital. And she walks in, and I'm like, not walking around. I'm like laying on the couch, having contractions and drinking coconut water. And my mom's there. So, yeah. So my mom was there, Nora was there. My mother-in-law who we'd asked to be at the birth, was actually already there. She'd been visiting for the weekend. And then my dad and my baby sister, Georgia, because I had asked Georgia to be at this birth, which was just a really sweet full circle thing. But they got there that evening. My dad had gotten this bee in his bonnet that he needed to bake banana bread before they left. So we still give him crap about the banana bread.
That's funny.
And luckily for them, it was a very long labor, so they didn't even come close to missing it. So yeah, one of the other midwives, Cheyenne, came again that evening. They'd had another mom go into labor, so now they have two other moms in labor, and I'm in labor, in early labor. And at this point, my blood pressure was still staying stable at that just like threshold level. I was 2.5 centimeters after almost 24 hours of contractions. I was 90% effaced, and I had a bulging bag, which was not super comfortable. There was just a lot of pressure from that. But we tried to sleep. That did not happen. So this is night number 2. And this was just a really long part of labor. This is where labor got really hard. My Lucas and Nora and my mom were all just really fantastic birth partners. Lucas and Nora helped me a lot during the first half of the night, and stayed up with me and just coached me through everything. They were fabulous doulas. And then somewhere around midnight or 1, they started hallucinating because they were so tired. Lucas thought that Nora was his cousin. Nora started having a conversation with an avocado plant we had in our living room.
Oh boy.
It was at that point that my mom said, okay, I'm going to take over sitting with her. You guys need to like crash for a minute. So she did. And then Charlotte, my main midwife, she's the one who owns the practice, and she and the student midwife, Kayla, got there at about 4:30 a.m. They had come straight from that other birth, and that was a long birth too. So they'd been up already for like 24 hours. And I was 3.5 centimeters at this point after, I can't do math, but I went into labor Monday night, and it was now early Wednesday morning, and I was 3.5 centimeters. So we decided to break my waters. And that was sort of our last ditch, like, we need to do something to get things going, because I was still doing okay, but I was definitely getting tired. And it was getting hard.
I can imagine.
So yeah. So we broke my waters at 5 a.m. And then it was awesome. Charlotte and Kayla brought like sleeping pads, and they just laid those out on our living room and kitchen floor in our tiny little rental house. And it was just a sleepover. Everybody was napping. And Lucas woke up at that point, and he continued to sit with me. Cheyenne came back about an hour after we broke my water, and then she was just amazing during that last little bit of labor. She kept on. I was just getting to a point where I was just really feeling like I couldn't do this, and I kept telling her that, and she was sitting there giving me the world's most amazing back rub. And I kept telling her, I can't do this. I can't do this. And she kept telling me, you can. And even if you can't, you will. Right. It's going to happen. Baby's coming out. So that was a really great just intention to hold on to. So yeah, we kept doing that until about 9 or so on Wednesday morning. And at that point, they let me get in the shower for about half an hour. And that was amazing. Oh my gosh, that was fabulous. And I think, I don't know, I know because they checked me after I got out of the shower and I was 5 to 6 centimeters with a cervical lip, but I feel like I went through transition in the shower, at least mentally. And that was the point at which I had a heart to heart with Myriam, had a good conversation with her and basically told her, hey baby, I have gotten to a point where I cannot do this on my own and I need you to help me. I really need your help. We need to work together to get you out. And I think she listened, because things definitely shifted at that point. So yeah, they checked me after I got out of the shower, excuse me. I was 5 to 6 centimeters cervical lip. So Charlotte, pushed that out of the way during a contraction, and that was the single worst part of labor. Ring of Fire was nothing compared to that. But luckily that dealt with it. And then Charlotte could feel at that point that Myriam was off to one side. Would that be asynclitic head? Can't remember if I'm using that term correctly or not. But yeah, so she was kind of pointing off to one side. So they got me in these super fun positions where I was like laying on the couch, but like with they had the birth stool up on the couch and they had like one of my legs up over the birth stool and it was somebody else was holding my other leg and it worked. It worked. That kind of shifted her to where she needed to be. And then I started pushing just after 11 on Wednesday morning. Wow. And that felt so good. I loved pushing. Pushing was great. Pushing was really hard work, but it felt like something was finally actually happening. So I pushed on the birth stool for 20 minutes or so. And then they asked me to move to the couch, on my back, which is, unusual for midwives, but they had concerns about the way that she was positioned and, tearing. So they felt that if I was on my back on the couch, that would help minimize, risk of tearing. And I think they were right on that. So, I didn't actually care that much. I was expecting to like really not want to be on my back and it was fine. And then fetal ejection reflex kicked in and that was crazy. It was just like, I suddenly had no control over any of my muscles and they all I don't know, it kind of felt like I just kind of like my uterus like hulked out or something.
Have not heard that one before. That's going to be quoted for sure. Heard lots of explanations for it, but have not heard a uterus hulk out. I love it.
That was for sure what it felt like. And a bit of a funny story about that too. I don't feel like I really ever got fully into labor lands like people talk about. I was fairly present for most of my labor. And so my midwife Cheyenne and I had this sort of ongoing banter about all the research I was doing. Because, in an appointment, she would bring something up and I'd be like, oh, yep. And I read about that last week on evidence-based birth. And, what do you think about these conclusions that I've come to? And so we, had this running joke. And so the fetal ejection reflex kicks in and I like get through that crazy contraction and I turn to Cheyenne and I'm like, I think that was fetal ejection reflex. And she just like, she rolls her eyes at me, gives me this look like, are you kidding me? You're pushing. Yes, it was. Focus on getting the baby out.
Yeah, we can give you good student brownie points later.
Exactly.
Let's focus.
Mm-hmm. So that was great. And then, she started crowning at 11:45. They told me, reach down, feel your head. And I did, and that was amazing. It was just so cool to feel her head. And she was crowning for, I think, that would have been about longer than that, like 20 minutes maybe. And they just let that happen. She was, going out and in, and they were good midwives and just let that happen. They were giving me lots of perineal support. And the third midwife in the practice, who's the only CNM, the rest of them are CPMs. But Eileen, the CNM, she, for insurance reasons, she had to be at my birth to sign the paperwork saying that she was there,
Okay.
in order for our insurance to cover it. The military insurance covers home birth if it is if a CNM is there. But they had done this before, and they're like, it basically Eileen just has to be there for watching the baby come out. As long as she does that, we'll be fine. So she walked in while I was crowning, which was kind of funny. So there was yet another person in the room. It was a full house in our tiny little living room. It was Lucas, there was my mom, my mother-in-law, Peggy, my sisters, Nora and Georgia. And then let's see, at this point, 3 midwives and a student midwife. And everybody was just cheering me on, and it was great. And then she was born at 12:07 p.m. on Wednesday, September 16th, for a grand total of just about 40 hours of labor.
Oh, mama.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty amazing when she was finally here. She had a nuchal cord. The cord was around her neck. And it was funny. My mom, as her head came out, and everybody could see that, my mom, it's funny. She didn't mean to react, but she just reacted without thinking. Her hands flew up to her mouth. She goes, "Oh, the cord." And I was really annoyed because I was still pushing the baby out. So I couldn't actually say anything, but I really wanted to tell my mom, like, no, actually, it's fine. 30% of all babies are born with a nuchal cord. And you know what? In most cases, it's totally fine. So that kicked in again. And then she had a nuchal hand as well. And so we think that was why she was off to one side and had all the issues with that. And that little elbow gave me a nice little pocket tear on the way out. So, which actually healed up pretty well. So I think my perineum didn't actually tear at all. It was just internal. So that, I don't know. To me at the time it sounded worse, but my midwives assured me, this kind of tear usually heals up actually really quickly. So yeah, so that was her birth.
And then she's here. And then how was the room?
Yeah.
What was the energy like when she was there?
Oh my gosh. It was just, we were all just glowing and relieved, and I immediately got just the most crazy birth high. It was insane. I don't know, you'd never know I had been up in labor for 40 hours and basically not slept for 2 nights. I didn't feel it at all. It was just amazing to have her here. They immediately put her up on my belly. Her cord was short, so she wouldn't come all the way to my chest. And I birthed the placenta pretty quickly. It was just 10 minutes later. And Lucas didn't feel great about cutting the cord. He gets a little queasy with blood sometimes, so he wasn't feeling too awesome about that. So we decided to let Georgia cut the cord, my baby sister. And that was really sweet for her to get to do that. And she was just super into that. So she did that. They stitched me up. And let's see, somewhere in there, and I can't remember when this happened, if it was before I birthed the placenta or after, but I started bleeding enough that they were starting to get a little concerned. So I love midwives too. They're coming at me with a syringe, and they're like, "So do we have consent to give you some Pitocin? Because we'd really like to do that."
Yeah.
Sure, baby's out. I don't care. Go for it. So they gave me a shot of Pitocin and started doing the fundal massage, which I know some women talk about that being really uncomfortable. For me, it wasn't that bad. And they had just been doing the fundal massage for just a little bit. And then it was the weirdest feeling. This really sizable blood clot just shot out of me, and it felt super weird, and everyone kind of went, "Whoa." And it was really funny. But turned out that was why I was bleeding a bit more than they liked. And
Okay.
after that was out, then I was totally fine. Um, so yeah,
Gosh.
I nursed her. They helped me sit up and nurse Myriam for the first time, and that was pretty amazing. After she nursed, they did the newborn exam just a couple feet away from me on our living room floor. Lucas got to help with that. He weighed her. She was 7 pounds 4 ounces. Um, and then, yeah, I had the best snack of my life, double stuffed Oreos and string cheese. God bless whoever got double stuffed Oreos while I was in labor. That was, I highly recommend that postpartum snack. And then, yeah, they helped me shower,
Mm.
and got everything cleaned up, and we just snuggled in. My dad came in at that point and got to meet Myriam. We got pho for dinner from a little pho restaurant just down the street, and would also highly recommend that as a postpartum meal. That was really just felt very nourishing.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, we settled in and got to know Myriam, and she was just the sweetest little baby, and she still is. Almost 11 months later, she's just a sweetheart, and really a really easy baby.
Mm.
So we're lucky.
I really love and appreciate those seemingly little details that you mentioned, after she arrives, but all those things add up
Mhm.
and add
They
to the
do.
experience, from the snacks to the taking care of you and the honoring of you. You just did this
Yes,
thing. And yes, baby's here, but there's still a lot of work, so to speak, or time that can be spent on the mother who's just birthed this baby. So whether it's
exactly.
the massage, helping you shower, tending to
Hmm.
you, it's those little things. And I feel like it can be had anywhere, but I only have the experience of having it in my home, and there's something about
Yeah.
that, having that in the home, that continued honoring of the space. And it's like the birth space, so to speak, continues on, even after the
Yeah,
baby
it
comes
really
out, because there's
does.
still things, like whether it's the newborn exam and weighing her, or
Mhm.
checking on the latch, checking the placenta, all these things are still
Yeah.
happening and still unfolding for the first time. And so I
Hmm.
love that you mentioned all those little things, because I think those are some of the things that aren't mentioned or forgotten, or people aren't
Right.
thinking about those when they're thinking about the birth experiences, that there are all of these other little details that come up
Hmm.
after, and they can be
Yeah,
things to really look forward to and to remember. So
for sure. And yeah, it's those little things that I do remember and are really sweet to me still. Like even with the shower, like it was Cheyenne who helped me shower, and it was just she was um just so willing to just let me take all the time I needed. And I was like, do you mind if I like wash my hair? Like it's really gross. It's been a while. She's like, course not.
yeah.
Wash your hair, do whatever you need to do. She's like, you probably don't want to shave your legs, but if you did, I'd stand here while you did that. Like,
That's a
so,
great point. I can't think of a time I would be least interested in the
right?
hair on my leg situation than right after giving birth. But
Yeah,
you
no,
never know. You know those little quirks that we come, like your dad with the
exactly.
banana bread. Maybe you had to shave your legs after giving birth,
Right?
and you would have had a
Exactly.
team to support you in that.
Hmm. And I definitely needed to wash my hair. It needed to happen.
Yeah.
And they were super happy to just give me all the time in the world to get back to feeling, moderately like myself.
Mm, yeah.
So,
What
yeah.
an incredible story. I'm so grateful to have heard it and to have you share it with us. And I'm going to post links to those resources that we mentioned, and even ones that
Yeah.
we didn't mention, because you listed some other really
Hmm.
great ones when we emailed back and forth. So I'm going to share those. Are there any closing thoughts or tips or advice that you would leave the space for listeners?
I think the last thing that I would just like to mention and put out there is that my my two biggest takeaways from this birth are, first of all, that having a community supporting you, even if they're not physically present, is so important. And that, as I talked about with all of our family and friends, just being there and praying for us made such a huge difference. And secondly, for me, it was that second night when labor got really, really hard. What I finally came to a point where I had to just let go. And I was trying to hold too much control over my labor. And I thought I was being intentional by doing that and saying, I'm not going to admit that this is painful because then that means that I'm having a painful birth and I'd rather not.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I did just have to admit, yeah, this freaking hurts. And that is okay. That is what this birth is. And I just had to let go and stop trying to control, my labor. And that was a huge, lesson just for me in, all aspects of my life as well. Cause I have a little bit of control freak tendencies. So it was really helpful to just get that very big reminder that you can't control everything and that's okay. And sometimes you just have to sink into that and let go and, put your trust in God and in the process, and in your body. Because your brain probably knows the least in this situation. So.
Right. Oh, I love that so much. I'm so happy you shared that. For those listening, just to recap, having the community, like you said, it can look many different ways. It doesn't have to look one way, but just to have it and to feel like you have that sense of community.
Exactly.
Feeling like you have the sense of the community is where it's at. Whatever it looks like is what it looks like, but to create that for yourself is huge. And then
100%.
The surrender piece that I hear you saying, surrender, and that what you described, none of that to me is a loss of power or sense of self. I actually think you gain more because you're open to possibility with that. So
absolutely.
One really big transformative epiphany for me a while back was in the concept of surrender. You think of it like waving the white flag and putting your hands behind your back, ready to be cuffed. And, for those who are listening and not watching, I'm doing a motion now of hands wide open. That's actually what surrender is. It's hands wide open to receive. And it's
absolutely,
it's not a closing of anything or a giving up of anything. It's that you're open to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I totally heard that.
That's a beautiful way of putting it.
Well, you helped bring it out. So I appreciate you listing those things because those can make all the difference in terms of how you step into the birth experience. So thank you for that. Thank you for being so beautiful and awesome and sharing of yourself and this really magical experience of your life. I don't take it for granted that we have so many who are so willing to share this intimate part of their lives with us and to share it with others because there's community. For some people listening to this podcast might be the biggest part of their sense of community. And so the more and more that we can add to it, I want to do. So having you here, sharing it now, this is what we need to be doing.
Thank you. And thank you so much for providing this just beautiful space for women to do that. I know this podcast was and still is such a huge resource for me and sense of support. And I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing with it. And you're changing the world one podcast episode at a time.
Thank you. Well, this is a part of that. So thank you, Josephine.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Quick note about the Doing It at Home podcast. Matthew and I are not doctors or medical professionals, and nothing we say should be taken as medical advice or opinion. If you have medical or health-related questions, please take them to a trained professional. We're here simply to entertain you with stories and conversations about pregnancy, birth, and parenthood.